We all think we know what financial stress feels like. It's that weight on your mind, right? The anxiety that keeps you up at night. But what if I told you that all that worry was actually leaving a physical mark on your body? Well, we're going to dive into that because some new research is suggesting the cost is way higher and a lot more real than we ever thought.
Okay, get a load of this. This was a headline from a pretty startling study that came out of the UK. And it found that the long-term biological damage from financial strain could actually be worse for our health than going through a divorce, losing a loved one, or even dealing with a major illness. Right? That was my first question too. How on earth could worrying about money be physically worse than grieving? Well, the answer is pretty fascinating, and it lies deep inside our own biology and psychology. And if you want a number, here it is. The study found that people who were specifically stressed out about their finances were nearly 60% more likely to have a high-risk health profile 4 years later. That is a huge measurable impact. So what is the actual biological proof behind a claim like this? Well, the science shows that it's all about our body's emergency systems being constantly switched on, even if it's just at a low level.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The researchers looked at these key markers in people's blood. They saw lasting changes in cortisol. That's our main stress hormone. When that's high for a long time, it can cause all sorts of health problems. They also saw higher levels of things called C-reactive protein and fibrinogen. Think of those as fire alarms for your body, signaling that there's chronic inflammation everywhere. And even IGF-1, a hormone tied to how we age, was being affected. And out of all the major life stressors they studied, financial strain was the #1 most damaging to these long-term health markers.
Okay, so if the biological changes are the symptom, what's the diagnosis? Well, behavioral scientists have a really great name for what's going on psychologically. They call it the bandwidth tax. So think about your brain like a computer. It's only got so much processing power, right? It's got a certain amount of bandwidth. You could only run so many programs at once before everything just starts to lag and slow down. Our cognitive bandwidth is the exact same way. It's limited. And this is the absolute core of the problem. That constant nagging background process of juggling bills, figuring out trade-offs, worrying about how to make ends meet. It's like a massive file that's always downloading in your brain. It just hogs all your mental resources, and it leaves less bandwidth for everything else, from solving problems at work to just remembering your grocery list. Let's look at a super clear real-world example. Imagine your car breaks down. Okay, if the repair costs $150, for a lot of people, that's an annoyance. It's frustrating for sure. But if that same repair costs $1,500, for someone already struggling, that's not just a financial problem anymore. It becomes an all-consuming mental crisis that just hijacks their entire cognitive bandwidth. And this isn't just a metaphor. Researchers have actually measured the impact of this mental load. They found that just thinking about a big financial problem could temporarily drop a person's cognitive performance by the equivalent of 13 IQ points. I mean, let that sink in. We're talking about a temporary hit to your brain power that's so big, it can literally change your classification on an IQ test. So this has nothing to do with how smart you are. It's about the sheer cognitive burden that scarcity puts on a person's mind. So once you understand this idea of the bandwidth tax, it kind of forces you to reframe the entire problem of poverty. You start to see it's not just about not having enough money, it's about what that lack of money does to your mind. And this slide shows that shift in thinking perfectly. For decades, the conversation was often about what are people in poverty doing wrong? But this new behavioral approach completely flips the script. It asks a much better, much more accurate question. What is the condition of poverty doing to people? And this quote just nails it. The behaviors we might see are so often just symptoms of living in an environment of scarcity, not some deep reflection of a person's character or their abilities. A huge reason for this is something called tunneling. When you're staring down an immediate crisis, like how am I going to pay rent tomorrow, your brain focuses on it with this incredible laser-like intensity, which is great for the short term, but it means everything else, long-term planning, preventative health checkups, you name it, gets pushed outside of that tunnel. And the other piece of this puzzle is just a total lack of slack. Think about it like packing for a trip. If you've got a giant suitcase, you can toss in an extra jacket, just in case. No big deal. But if your suitcase is tiny and already packed to the brim, you have zero room for error. A little unexpected rain could totally ruin your trip. While living without financial slack is just like having that tiny suitcase. Any small shock can instantly turn into a full-blown crisis.
Okay, so if the problem is this huge tax on our mental bandwidth, what do we do about it? Well, the good news is that behavioral science also gives us a kind of prescription, a way to design systems that actually take this reality into account.
And the framework is pretty straightforward. It's built on three core principles. First, we have to cut the hidden costs. Second, we have to create slack. And third, we need to reframe the entire interaction to empower people.
Now, cutting costs isn't just about money. It's also about reducing that hassle factor. The time spent in waiting rooms, the confusing paperwork, the hours on hold. Every single one of those hassles is a direct tax on someone's already drained bandwidth.
And listen to this quote from a mom in Seattle. It just says it all. The hurdles can be so extreme that they become barriers themselves, almost punishing people just for needing help in the first place.
So, creating slack is all about building in that buffer. It means designing programs that give people some breathing room, whether that's through emergency funds or flexible deadlines or just a predictable income, so that a single flat tire doesn't completely derail their life. And finally, reframing. This is all about changing the dynamic from one of dependency to one of partnership. It means treating people with respect, trusting them to be the experts in their own lives, and designing services that are empowering, not humiliating.
And that's really the question we're left with, isn't it? The science is crystal clear. Financial scarcity has a real, measurable cognitive and biological cost. But it also shows us that the solutions don't have to be some massive revolution. They just require smarter, more humane design. If we can reduce that bandwidth tax, we don't just help people financially, we restore the very mental capacity they need to build a better life.